them apart!
I can remember back when the Kickstarter funding trend got started when Obsidian Entertainment was looking for money in order to resurrect the long-dead CRPG genre, specifically those in the style of games like Baldur's Gate. Since then, we've seen many other developers follow suit to bring their unique game ideas, those too wild for the publishers, to life. One of the first campaigns I backed on Kickstarter was for something similar to what became Pillars of Eternity, specifically Owlcat Games' Pathfinder Kingmaker, the first RPG based on Paizo's pen and paper role-playing game, which undeniably put a great burden on this game to perform well, not only for the sake of fans, but for people to whom this would be their first taste of Pathfinder. And as far as reunions go for the fans, this is a perfectly fine adaptation that will leave them happy. And as for first introductions for people like me, Kingmaker more than succeeds at being a solid introduction, albeit without also stumbling and spilling some beer all over the player. Like its genre compatriot, storytelling is Kingmaker's biggest strength in both not only narrative, but in presentation to the player. We play as an adventurer who's been recruited by a baroness as part of an expedition to tame the Stolen Lands, a lawless region that no one has been able to properly rule, and along the way, we have to contend with the likes of bandit lords, a malicious fairy, and an Italian midget. The story is well written, easily on par with early BioWare and even Obsidian Entertainment, and features likeable and diverse characters with unique personalities. Something that's helped by some solid voice acting that we get in spades for the major characters. The presentation for the story is also creative, in that the devs change up how it's presented at times. Every once in a while the game will suddenly shift into a stylized text adventure for certain events. Ultimately, this is just more reading, but it is a breath of fresh air over just watching characters standing in a static fashion and reading from a text box. And the choices the player can make during these act as failable skill checks, which does help draw you into them even more, as well as making your imagination go wild by imagining your character either succeeding or failing and then seeing the results in the game itself. However, there is one glaring issue with the story, and that's how it is structured. The game uses an act-based structure, which is fine unto itself, but the issue is the ticking clock aspect that was attached to it. In the first act, you've got 3 months to take down a bandit called the Stag Lord, and at first, it's fine. It's giving you urgency to manage exploring and hunting the Stag Lord down before time runs out. But in the second act is where it starts to cause problems. With the exception of one specific plot thread where it can be literally impossible to progress depending on your character build, the story slows down to a literal halt, leaving the player with nothing to do but piss around to stave off boredom until the new countdown gets closer to 0 and starts adding plot threads and quests that are related to it.
I wonder what lies beyond.
Outside of the text adventure segments, gameplay is what we've come to expect from the classics and the contemporaries, which isn't a bad thing, but it is starting to become passé. For the bulk of the gameplay, you'll be spending your time reading and taking part in strategic combat, but after playing Neverwinter Nights Enhanced Edition, I'm left wondering, why isn't that game's combat being recreated? It had the exact same combat as Kingmaker, but the difference is that it had a more dynamic camera and detailed battle animations, which made it all the more entertaining to watch, and ultimately led to it holding up much better over time compared to the likes of Baldur's Gate. I'm honestly stumped as to why no modern CRPG developers have tried to recreate that, and instead stuck with what the likes of Baldur's Gate have done, with combat really just looking like your characters are standing around and clubbing enemies with no reaction outside of when they're defeated or using magic. But beyond this issue, combat is perfectly fine and it does offer a solid experience. Plus, I dare say in the case of Kingmaker, it has a leg up over the likes of Tyranny and Pillars of Eternity thanks to some limited interactivity with the environment that can influence enemy encounters, such as when I found a stash of wine that was to be delivered to the Stag Lord and I was able to poison it for an advantage in the fight with him.
And will be definitely will be.
Another advantage Kingmaker has over its modern compatriots is the kingdom management system. As you rule over the Stolen Lands, your barony will grow into a mighty kingdom, where you'll assign party members to fulfill government roles to help you manage it. Ruling comes with its own challenges, as you have to manage limited resources to develop your capital, and decide between dealing with problems personally or having your advisors deal with them, preventing them from dealing with issues only they can deal with. It all comes together into a very deep setup where you have to weigh your choices carefully, especially since if you screw up running your kingdom, it can collapse and you'll fail the game. However, there is a problem with Kingmaker that is a source of frequent rage quits and will leave a good number of players walking away from it. and that is its difficulty. That isn't to say it's not balanced overall or challenging in a satisfying way, but you do need to keep in mind this is Owlcat's first game, so naturally, at least something could be expected to not be right. And thankfully, it's not the game's technical performance. It runs great. The reason why difficulty is a source of frustration is because there are so many needless spikes in it that are literally impossible to beat until later in the game. A great example of this is an early side quest where you're tasked with finding some berries that grow in a cave. They're guarded by giant spiders, but when you fight them, out pop swarms of baby spiders that can only be hurt with grenades and area of effect spells. But at no point does the game ever tell you this. It withholds vital information so you're doomed pissing in the wind. In fact, I personally was only able to figure this out by searching it online outside of the game. And by doing that, I also found out it's also possible to completely screw up your character's build, thus ending up with a character that's literally incapable of progressing through the game. Something I imagine will anger a lot of people who like playing as a muscle wizard.
Lost.
As it is, Pathfinder Kingmaker was definitely worth the wait back when I gave Owlcat my money, and it will give die-hard CRPG fans what they want and more, as well as give a more casual player something that they can enjoy and see a fantasy universe that really hasn't seen much love in terms of games. In spite of its problems, there is still plenty of fun to be had, and there's a great story to go along with it. Now, if you'll excuse me, there's a horde of trolls heading for my capital, and their hides would just make a great tapestry for my keep.
So be it. Rise, my unfortunate jester. Your performance is not over yet.
Hey, thanks for checking out this video, I really do appreciate it, and if you really enjoyed it, then feel free to check out my Minds or Gab to get updates on upcoming videos. Speaking of which, the next game review is going to be for the all-new Call of Cthulhu RPG, and I've also got a review of the new Halloween movie, and I'm planning to try to cram as many movie reviews as I can into 2018 before the year comes to an end. I've got all that and more coming up, so like usual, feel free to stick around.